Welcome to Pretty Lies and Alibis. Let's seek the truth and travel the long road to justice together. What you know, Alibuyers, welcome to another episode of Pretty Lies and Alibis. I'm Gigi. It's Wednesday, January 21st. Hope you guys are having a good day so far. I'm going to go ahead and recap the morning session in the Brendan Banfield trial. I have a lot going on this afternoon, so I wanted to make sure I'm not too late getting this out tonight. We started the day with the defense attorney asking for the case to be dismissed due to false testimony. He is referring to Juliana. Also, when the Commonwealth rested, they had brought no detectives on to show any of the digital forensics or proof of catfishing. The defense pointed out some of the detectives thought it was Christine reaching out to Joseph Ryan, and he said the ethical requirements have not been met. The Commonwealth acknowledges some witnesses were not called that were on their list, and by putting extra witnesses on the list that could be called, they just want to make sure they're not limiting themselves should they need evidence to come in. She said they called the witnesses they believe told the story to the jury, and there's no requirement that they call a lead detective as a witness for a narrative. And as far as the defense allegation that Juliana presented false testimony, the Commonwealth said that is for the jury to decide. The judge denied that motion, and the defense case starts. We start out with Officer Beckner. He was brought in to play all of his body cam. The Commonwealth showed a portion of it, and the defense brought it all in. It was under seal, so we could not see the video. We just had to listen very closely. When it starts, he's about to enter the house for the first time. You hear a little chaos with him trying to establish who's who, asking questions, and then he tells Juliana to go outside now. He yells out that one has a gunshot wound and the other has multiple stab wounds, and there was no pulse on Joe Ryan. You hear him say he's been shot in the head. At one point, he says, "I don't even know what to do," and then he says, "She is still breathing." The witness escorted Brendan to the ambulance and then to the hospital, so they show more of this footage. He asks someone to check Brendan out. He says the knife's there and the gun's on the bed. He does tell firefighters to watch what they're kicking, which was the blankets where that knife was. The defense asked him, "Why were you holding Brendan?" Brendan said something about his right leg, and the witness wanted him checked out just to be sure he was okay. It wasn't until about 10 minutes into this body cam that Brendan asks, "Where is his daughter?" And he mentions that they have an au pair. He's told that his daughter is with an officer. Brendan says, "I took the knife from him." And then another officer takes Brendan's jacket, and they ask Brendan to take his watch off. He's asked where all the blood came from, and Brendan said, "I was holding her neck." They ask if he wants to go to the hospital, and he asks if he can be with Christine. The officer says they would be working on her, so not immediately, and then Brendan says he wants to be with her. He asks what's going to happen to his daughter, and the witness said, "Not sure. She's sitting with one of our officers right now until they figure out what's going on." At this point, he's whipping up some tears on the video, and then he tells the officer that he is with the IRS. He's crying, and they ask if he wants to go in the ambulance or in the police cruiser, and Brendan just says he wants to see Christine. They do search Brendan in the ambulance, and the defense asks why. The witness said to be sure he had no more weapons on his person. It sounds like Brendan said, "Here's my credentials." They ask which weapon was his, and he said both were. He talks about his daughter and asked if the officers are going to tell her anything. And the witness says, "I don't think they're going to tell her anything. They don't want to upset her." Brendan says she's only 4, and he starts crying again. Somebody in the background says something, and Brendan says she didn't make it. The witness says he didn't hear what this person said. At this point, they're at the hospital, and someone asks to check the status of Christine. The doctor comes in and says, "Your wife is dead. I'm so sorry." And then you hear Brendan crying. The doctor says, "You were there at the time, and I think she died from blood loss," and points out that her airway was okay and they were able to intubate her. Brendan tells the doctor he was trying to apply pressure. The doctor told him that it just wasn't possible to stop all that blood loss, and they did everything they could. And the doctor also tells Brendan he did everything possible. This is the point where the witness tells him he can wash his hands. The witness says that he was not told to not allow Brendan to wash his hands. Somebody says, "Sorry for your loss," and then he lets out some whimpers. He's asked if he wants to change into scrubs, and he says yes. At this point, the witness tells Brendan that Juliana and his daughter have been taken to police headquarters and they're okay. I couldn't quite hear what he asked, but Brendan did ask if he could do something, and the officer said not yet. They have to investigate what happened first. A detective will come and explain more. He tells Brendan they won't ask him any questions about what happened, but they do have to take photos of him, and he also tells him that they're going to need to take his clothing. They did say they would let him make some phone calls. A chaplain comes in to pray, they have a prayer, and then they say the Lord's Prayer. And at this point, the witness shuts off body cam once the detectives get there at the hospital. On cross, the witness said they were trying to find a chest seal for Christine. He was also the first person to approach Joe. He put a chest seal on him. He said his hands were across his chest and there was no blood coming out until he started CPR. Brendan was not treated for any injuries. The next witness, Officer Balmore, they also play his body cam. You hear radio chatter as he is driving to the house, updating on what they know so far. You hear him go inside. Brendan was attending Christine at this point, and you hear Juliana yapping in the background. The witness is heard on body cam saying multiple stab wounds to the neck, but she's breathing. Get medics in here now. He also says she got stabbed by him, meaning Joe. The defense asked if he went out of the house at the same time as the last witness, and he said no. But they did meet up at the ambulance where Brendan was, and his body cam was essentially the same, so they stopped his there. On cross, when you entered the room, Brendan was on his knees next to Christine, but he wasn't using that blue towel to stop the bleeding. No. Was he using nearby blankets or sheets? No. And that was it for his testimony. The last witness before lunch was Leanne Singley. She works with Bloodstain pattern analysis, and she's asked about the knife. At the base of the blade where the handle meets up, that area was sampled for DNA. And the results of that was Christine and Joe's DNA was on there, and Brendan and Juliana were eliminated. This, again, is where I wish they'd asked Juliana if Brendan wore gloves. I would totally assume he did because it's going to be impossible not to have injuries to his own hand while he was stabbing her. The witness also looked at photos of Joe from autopsy. In knife-related wounds, they often see the assailant self-wound. She looked at the autopsy photos and the report and saw that Joe had an injury listed as a central cut or a puncture wound on his left thumb. For Brendan's hands, she looked at the body cam, and also investigators looked at his hands for injuries and none were seen. She also reviewed a report from a private lab that did some testing. They did some sampling from Joe's pants on the interior and exterior waistband, the button, and the zipper. She says the sample was taken avoiding the blood staining, and what they did was swap for touch DNA. And the results of that area was positive for Christine and Joe's DNA, with Brendan and Juliana eliminated. She talks about Joe's left forearm, and there was a series of irregular shaped blood drops, or stains as she calls them, and she says the blood was clinging to his arm hair, which distorted them from seeing the true size and shape of these stains. She's asked, what do you look at to determine if someone was involved or not in a stabbing? There's an objection. He asked if anything excluded Joe as the stabber. That was objected to. So he moves on. There were certain bloodstains the Commonwealth's witness classified that this witness would not. She said the forearm had the irregular shaped stains, and the Commonwealth's witness said those were drip stains. But the witness again says with the hair in the way, it would be inappropriate to classify because the target surface was not ideal to make that classification. That is where we left off at lunch. They've already been through 3 witnesses. I think yesterday he said maybe 4 or 5. So is there a chance that they rest today? Maybe. I would say if not, probably by tomorrow. But that was it for the morning session. I'll update you on the afternoon session a little later. Hope you guys have a good rest of your afternoon. We will see you soon.